Hi guys, and welcome to day 25 of Lent. Today we're looking at the healing of a man with a withered hand through Mark's Gospel chapter 3 verses 1 to 6. Jesus went to the synagogue. There was a man there with a withered hand. People were watching to see if Jesus would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they could frame a charge against him. "Stand up," said Jesus to the man with the withered hand, "and come out here." And he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath, or to do evil, to save life, or to kill?" They stayed quiet. He was deeply upset at their hardened hearts and looked round at them angrily. Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out right away and began to plot with the Herodians against Jesus, trying to find a way to destroy him. It's difficult for me to remember what life was like when I was a boy. It's even harder for young people today to imagine what it was like in their own country 50 years ago. Almost everywhere has changed drastically. In England, one change in particular was noticeable. When I was young, everybody kept Sunday as a very special day. Just a few decades ago, in the average English town, there were no shops open on Sundays. There was no professional sport. Yes, no football, racing, everything was very, very quiet. Nothing like today. A cartoon of the time sums up the attitude and the problem. An anxious father, worried about what the neighbours may say, tells his little girl she mustn't play with her hoop in the street on Sunday. She should go into the back garden. "Isn't it Sunday in the back garden?" asked the girl. The irony, of course, is that whenever Jesus is faced with the question of Sabbath observance, he moves in the opposite direction. He appears to take a shockingly liberal line. This has been a problem for strict Sunday observant enthusiasts, who for centuries have cheerfully transferred the Jewish commandment of observing the seventh day of the week and switched it to observing the first day, something the New Testament never actually does, though it's clear the early Christians met for worship on the first day and the day they celebrated Jesus' resurrection. Today, most Western Christians, frankly, are in a bit of a muddle on the issue. We all know that the old-style Sabbath observance as a social phenomenon has gone for good. Even though we mostly believe that one day off work a week is a healthy ideal, it's not at all obvious how best, almost appropriately, to achieve it. These thoughts and puzzles may crowd in our minds when we read about Jesus healing on the Sabbath, but if we're going to see what it meant at the time, we have to go back not just to the Sabbath observance of our, or at least my childhood, but to the world of the first century Palestine. For a Jew in Jesus' world, the Sabbath had all that mixture of social pressure and legal sanction, but it meant much more as well. It was a badge of Jewishness for people who had been executed and killed simply for being Jewish. It was a national flag that spoke of freedom to come, of hope for the great day of rest when God would finally liberate Israel from pagan oppression. It looked back to the creation of the world and to the exodus from Egypt, and it marked out those who kept it as God's special people, God's faithful people, God's hoping people. It was, after all, a commandment deeply embedded in the Jewish scriptures. So why does Jesus appear to drive a coach and horses through it? Because it had become a weapon. It had become a sign of his fellow Jews' commitment to a fierce and exclusive nationalism. Along with other badges and flags, it spoke now not of Israel as the light of the world, but of Israel as the children of light, and the rest of the world is remaining in darkness. And this attitude, as so easily happens when religion and nationalism are wedded tightly together, spilled over into popular attitudes even towards fellow Jews. For many groups, it wasn't enough to be a loyal Jew. One had to be a better loyal Jew than the other lot. And in this no-win situation, the whole point of the commandment, celebrating God's creation and redemption, past, present, and future, had been lost sight of. The rule mattered more than reality. Jesus' verdict on that was that it constituted hard-heartedness, one of the regular charges that the prophets levelled against law-breaking Israelites in days gone by, like the wilderness generation under Moses. His contemporaries were unable to see and celebrate what God was actually doing in front of their very noses. So he puts the question in its starkest terms, in words dripping with irony. Is it legal to do good on the Sabbath, or only do evil? Is it illegal to make people alive or only to kill them? If the Sabbath speaks of creation and redemption, the answer is surely obvious. And if the current interpretation of the rules says otherwise, so much the worse for the current interpretation of the rules. Of course, it's not clear what Jesus actually did, speaking a word of command and leaving the man to stretch out his own hand. Hardly a breach of Sabbath observance, was breaking of the official or even the unofficial interpretation of the Sabbath. But his approach and attitude were clearly on a collision course with those of the self-appointed guardians of the ancestral traditions. In a move that anticipates again the whole larger story Mark is telling, the unofficial leaders of the Jewish opinion, the Pharisees, get together with their natural enemies, the supporters of Herod Antipas, whom the Pharisees normally regarded as the dangerous traitor to Judaism. Why did they do that? The Pharisees had no power themselves. If they were going to attack Jesus, they needed to make unlikely alliances. Thus, it would be at the end, when Caiaphas and Pilate together sent Jesus to his death. Thus, it would not be long afterwards, when the young Pharisees, Saul of Tarsus, obtained authority from the chief priest to persecute the church. Thus, it was in this instance, with local Galilean Pharisees making common cause with the supporters of Herod Antipas in a futile attempt to do away with Jesus. So, reflection for today. Explore the relationship between religion and nationalism as exemplified by Sabbath observance during Jesus' time. How can the merging of religious and nationalistic identities lead to exclusivity and the marginalization of others? Can you think of instances where religious rules have been weaponized and made to do a job for which they were never intended? And keeping the Sabbath was one of the 10 commandments. Can we recapture the true spirit of the Sabbath in a world where economic forces are frequently far more dehumanizing than the abused Sabbath law ever was? How can we learn again what it means to live in a rhythm of work and rest, and to help one another in our wider society to do the same without becoming legalists in the process? I'd love to know your thoughts, guys. Leave your comments down below. I'll see you tomorrow.